Hey everyone, Experion here, back again with another video. Schedule has changed slightly, so I'll be releasing and uploading videos most likely every weekend rather than every Thursday, because my schedule has changed up a bit. And also, I'm sure as some of you have noticed, the scenery behind me has changed as well. I am still by the beach, but I'm more in a more secluded area. Matter of fact, I'll show you guys what's behind, or rather I should say in front. So this is my view right now. I'd love if you guys could have had that view as well, but I wanted to sit with this tree behind me so I have something to lean back on, so that's why. But yeah, there's something I wanted to talk about recently that I've noticed that I found very interesting, right? I just recently started a new job, and this job requires me to interact with a lot of younger individuals, people who are, I'd say, in the age range to like 16 to 19, around there. And it's so interesting to hear their mindsets, how they think, their perspective on life. Because with me, in my recent life, right, I have interacted with a lot of, oh, excuse me, a lot of adults, people in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. Those are the people who I normally interact with on a day-to-day basis, right? So it was sort of a new experience, believe it or not, even though I myself am young, early 20s, 22. But it was so interesting hearing the perspective of these young kids, because the way I see the generation coming up behind me, they're very fascinating. I have to say, they're very fascinating, right? It's also kind of funny how they look at me as old. They think I'm old already, it's kind of crazy to me. I'm like, guys, I'm like only 22, but they look at me like, nah, bro, you're old. I'm like, goodness me, all right. But they're so fascinating. They have so much more knowledge than even I did, right? And I'm like right there, right there close to them. I won't even, but I'm not exactly, I would say, in the same generation as them per se. I'm talking, these are people who are born like, after I would say like what, 2002. These are people who are born in like the later 2000s, 2010s going up, you know what I mean? And it's like, it's so interesting. They're so much more, I feel like collectively they're a lot more intelligent, because I overhear these young guys, most of them are young fellas that I'm working with. I hear them talk, and these guys are very intelligent. They speak of a lot of things which back in my day, right? I can't believe I'm saying that. It makes, like, what is going on? It sounds so wrong to say. Back in my day is crazy. But seriously though, when I was growing up, the kind of stuff that we would talk about is just like dumb stuff, you know what I mean? Like silly stuff. But these guys are out here talking about King Leonidas and the Battle of the 300 Spartans, and talking about the Grenadian Revolution, which is something that, mostly the older people in Grenada here talk about, the revolution and Morris Bishop and whatever the case may be. These young guys talking about that stuff and very educated. But at the same time, it's like I can see that in terms of spiritually, they're still on their journey to being awakened. It's such a fascinating thing, because you would think that with more knowledge you gain more wisdom, right? But as time tells, that's usually not the case. You could have a lot of knowledge about a lot of things, but you can still be quite unwise. It was just so fascinating to me to hear these guys talk, because it's like, on one hand I'm seeing their intelligence, I'm like, wow, you guys are talking about stuff that most young guys would never even talk about. You know what I mean? But at least when I was growing up, they would never talk about that kind of stuff. But at the same time, they would also talk about, oh, I had to go and sell drugs and rob people. I'm thinking to myself, like, it's such an interesting dynamic, you know what I mean? It is such an interesting dynamic to hear that, because it's like, you would think those two things don't mesh well, but it's like they're so complex, and I feel like as new generations keep emerging, the more complex we become. And it was just so interesting to see that dynamic also from a spiritual perspective of, these are very, very complex, sophisticated young people. But how the dynamic plays out when they are still not awake, is so interesting. It's like they're in the depths, but they're still so capable, and if only they could realize how much more capable they could be. You know what I mean? I just had to talk about it. I had to. It was something that really, really fascinated me. I've never seen something like that before, not when I was growing up, and certainly not a situation where I deal with that kind of people. You know what I mean? Because as I said before, most people I interact with nowadays are older people, right? So the sort of conversations I have and the perspectives that I interact with are very, very different. So coming into this environment, working with the younger generation now, it has been quite an interesting journey, quite the interesting journey. And I could see some of myself, my younger self, in them to a certain extent as well. A lot of them, they want to prove themselves. They feel like they have to do certain things or say certain things just to make themselves, like, important. They have to get that validation, you know what I mean? Like, to tough up themselves, puff up themselves. Like, oh, look at me, I is some kind of bad boy, some kind of gangster, you know what I mean? And it's so interesting when they interact with me now, because I've completely, like, my whole viewpoint has completely changed. Because I will admit, but when I was a younger guy, I would do the same thing, try to do things to be validated, or present myself in a certain way. So it's like, I get it, you know what I mean? But now I'm completely different. I don't do anything for validation. I don't do anything for anybody's approval. I don't need people to respect me. I respect myself, right? I don't need people to love me. I love myself. If somebody comes along and they want to respect me because of my actions, or love me because of who I am, great, fantastic. But it's not something where I'm like, I need it. You know what I mean? And it's just the way these guys act. Again, like, it reminded me a little bit of myself growing up. And it's so interesting interacting with them when it comes to a lot of things. For example, again, as I said, a lot of them feel like they gotta be a sort of bad boy, to gain respect. And I'm telling them, hey guys, it's not worth it. You know what I mean? Like, they're talking about, oh, we gotta do all these things and be a gangster and go out there on the street. And I'm like, fellas, it's not worth it. It's not worth it, man. Like, and the thing is, I have experience with that. Not that I was directly involved in any of those things, but I have experience with acquaintances who have been involved in those things, and I've seen how it affected their life, how it affected the lives of people around them. It is not worth it, man. It is not worth it. That sort of life, that gangster life, that drug life, it is not worth it. There is no honor among thieves, and that's something I always tell them. There is no honor amongst thieves. When you're engaged in that line of work, you can't trust nobody, no matter how close they are, no matter if they're your homeboy or whatever the case may be. No matter how close you are, you can't fully trust. What if there's a situation where one of the guys gets caught, and of course they get the ultimatum, the classic ultimatum: hey, you can either go to jail for like 15 years, or you speak, you snitch, and we'll knock it down to like 5. What do you think that guy is gonna do? Do you think that guy is really gonna take 15 for the team? Highly unlikely, right? Highly unlikely. There's so many situations where it's just not worth it. Or for example, as I said, there's no honor among thieves. These kind of individuals, once you wrong them, they're not just coming after you, they're coming after your family, your friends, your partner, everybody, and then eventually what ends up happening is that now, because of what you've done, the people you love get involved and they get hurt. It's not worth it. I try to tell these guys that, but of course, they're young, they're impressionable, they think that they should be that kind of way because they'll give them respect. But I like, as Kendrick so nicely said, a real gangster is either dead, in jail, or behind the scenes getting real money. And that is absolutely a fact. That is what it is. And again, I can say that from experience. A lot of people don't know that I grew up for a bit in Trinidad before I came to Grenada. So I realized a lot of the Grenadian youth here, they glamorize that sort of lifestyle. But I tell them, especially from somebody who has been from Trinidad, I tell them, guys, you have no idea how crazy this can get. Like, you guys think what it's like to live that kind of life, but you don't know. You really don't know. Trinidad takes it to a whole other level. But anyways, besides that, it's like that's one aspect where I try to help them, at least to I don't tell them like, yo, I don't try to force them to change their perspective. I just give suggestions. I propose questions so that they can think about it afterward and be like, that's a good question, let me think about that. Oh, Stefan made a pretty good point, let me think about that. Another thing is relationships. I find it's actually worse. I'm not even gonna lie. The younger generation, the divide between men and women is actually worse, which I've genuinely never seen this before. This is the first time I've ever seen this, where these young guys, they have no faith in women whatsoever. They view women as objects, tools, as like not really them. Like, I don't even know how to explain it. It's like they know women are also humans, but it's like they treat them with, it's almost as if they're lesser than, you know what I mean? Like they treat them they put them at a distance. It is bizarre to me. Like, I'm hearing these young guys talk and they're like, boy, I could never trust a woman, and women just cheat all the time, and women lie, and women are good for nothing, and if it was just me, I just there to like smash and dash. And I'm like, I would expect that talk from like jaded older guys, right? But I'm hearing this talk from these young boys, and it's like, whoa, where's that? Like, do you like it threw me off like real bad, because I'm like, yo, fellas, like, do y'all even have the experience to be saying this? And the thing is, perhaps they do, but it's like so early at such a young age already. Like, my goodness, that was a bit of a reality check for me, like, to hear their perspective on that. And it was like, whoa, I didn't realize it was that bad. These young guys already have that sort of mindset, and it's sad, you know what I mean? Like, and even there was one thing in particular that like genuinely shocked me. For them, there's a lot of fragile masculinity in the sort of environment that I feel like these young men are being raised in. where even when it comes to being intimate with women, for them to prove that they've been intimate, they're like, oh, you have to record it and show other dudes to prove that you've had sex. And I'm like, what I tell you, I feel like, I don't even know, I feel like an alien almost. It's like, that was never a thing, ever, when I was growing up. Ever. That was never a thing. Like, what? Where for you to prove you had sex, you had to like video record yourself. I'm like, what are these guys on? I've never heard that in my life. Sorry about that. Yeah, I've never heard that ever. But that's like normal for these guys, where they're like, yeah, man, and they're sharing these videos like it's normal. And again, it's like, to me, it's so foreign to me, because one, that was literally never a thing. I've never even heard about that. And two, on a moral standpoint, absolutely fucking not. I would never do that. You know, it's such a disrespect to the person I'm with, to the woman I'm with, and a disrespect to myself. No, absolutely not. And I'll be perfectly honest, not only is that disrespect to her and to me, I'm a very jealous person. And I'm not afraid to admit that. I'm not sharing any part of my partner intimately with anybody. I don't have anything to prove, you know. And again, that's the thing. It's the wanting that validation, right? Wanting to prove that, you know, they're a man and they're tough, that they would go so far as to share themselves being intimate with other women, with other guys, just to gain some sort of validation. You know, it is truly, truly, there's a lot of words I could use to describe that, to be honest, but sad, bad, weird. You know what I mean? Like, wow. I feel like I'm in another reality. It's like, this was something that was I never even knew of, right? Because I mean, even when it comes to my little brother, granted he's in a different situation than the rest of these guys, you know, but like, I don't even really talk with him that much. So it's so interesting to get such a raw look into this younger generation growing up, how they think and how they operate. It is, wow, goodness me, it is something, you know. So again, in terms of like wanting to puff up themselves and act big and bad, and then the whole relationship stuff, and when they interact with me, with my views, they very much think I'm weird. They actually told me that. They're like, nah, you're weird. But I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, nah, you guys are fucking weird. You guys are real messed up. Obviously, I'm not going to tell them that to their face, because I have the understanding that, you know, they're still growing, they're still learning. Eventually, they're going to reach a point in their lives where they're going to realize, hey, this sort of lifestyle is not sustainable, it's not healthy, it's doing me more harm than good. And then they will be presented with a choice whether to remain that way or to change, right? Everybody gets presented that choice eventually in some point of their lives. So I'm not worried about that. But when they interact with me, it's like, again, for the relationship thing, when they ask me, because they ask me like, hey, like, what do you think? And I'm like, no, I don't do any of that stuff. I don't. And they're like, yo, wouldn't you if a woman came up to you and she wanted to have sex, wouldn't you just have sex with her? I'm like, no, I wouldn't. I don't know her like that. I don't know anything about her. I don't know if I like her, if I don't like her. Heck, she might have AIDS. I don't fucking know. I need to get to know the person first. I don't just have sex with strangers. I take my sexual energy very seriously. But again, I didn't even bring that up because I know they wouldn't understand that concept yet. But I just simply said, you know, no, I don't do that. I have to get to know the person first. And that was like a novel concept for them. It blew their mind. When I tell you, the whole room erupted into like chaos. I'm not even kidding. The whole room, all of them was like, what? What you mean by that? And everybody just started talking. And I'm like, yo, fellas, one at a time. I can't listen to everybody all at once. All right? It was something they couldn't believe. to know the woman first. Unbelievable. It's like they never even heard about that. No, they actually did not ever hear about that before. And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, what? So how long you would take to talk to her? I'm like, as long as it takes. And it's not to say that I'm talking to her because I want to have sex. I'm talking to her to see if we're a good mesh, if I want to be friends with her, and then to see if I want to further have a relationship, right? Um, Sometimes it may work out, sometimes it may not work out, but I'm not in a rush. I'm not going anywhere, right? Um, and it was like they blew their mind, legit blew their mind. Man, it was hilarious. It was so funny. And then they were like, so like, what are you looking for in a relationship? I said, I'm looking for a wife. That's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for my ride or die. Once I find my woman, my partner, that's it. Like, I'm set. And then again, the room erupted yet again. They were like, nah, boy, that's crazy. In this generation. And it's funny that they said that. Because again, as I said, this younger generation, they're so self-aware, right? They're super intelligent. The fact that these young guys would even say that, they're like, what, in this generation? I'm like, whoa, wow. I have to give them credit for the fact, even though they're in such a low frequency at the moment, they're very smart. They're not, I don't know how to explain it. It's like, just because they're in a low frequency doesn't mean they're stupid. It just means they're at a low frequency. And it's just like, wow, the fact that they were so self-aware to even say that kind of also really fascinated me. But I'm like, yes, of course. And again, I could have gone into the fact that you attract what you are. I could have done all of that stuff, but I just simply kept it simple so that I would at least understand my viewpoint rather than me going into a whole bunch of spiritual topics, right? So yeah, I was like, yeah, I'm looking for a solid partner for a wife. You know what I mean? I'm not out here to hook up with anybody. I'm not here to do any one night stands, no situationships, none of that stuff. You know, um, I'm looking for one woman which I can be loyal to for the rest of my life. And again, that was like another concept they could not understand. They were like, what? They couldn't believe it. You know what I mean? Um, and they were like, nah, that's weird, man. That's crazy. But I'm like, yeah, no, like, that's me, and to some of their credit, they were like, you know what, bro, nah, you know what, we respect that, to a certain extent. They respect that you are being different, even though they think I am like going against the grain. They're like, some of them were like, you know what, we respect that, you know what I mean. You'll find who you're looking for eventually. And I appreciated that. I really did appreciate that sentiment from them. But it was just so interesting to see the dynamic play out between our two different perspectives, and again how the age difference was played into as well with the different generations. So interesting to me how the whole thing just plays out, how the whole thing played out and continues to play out. Ah, man. It is very interesting. Very interesting. Very interesting. Yeah. I'm just taking some time to just think about what I've just said, because it's like, even now I'm still processing everything, and processing, how all those interactions played out. I definitely think me being in there will help them to a certain extent, but again, it just feels like I've been dropped into a different reality to see how this younger generation is growing up. Hmm. Yeah. Well, that's pretty much all I already wanted to talk about today. If anything, I will say that, when it comes to me raising my family, I know my kids are definitely going to have the right tools necessary they need to become outstanding individuals, at the very least. That's one thing I will definitely say. My kids are going to have the tools they need to become outstanding individuals, you know. Simply by the example I myself show. I'm not, because again, a part of me was like, should I like teach these guys? I'm like, yeah, nah, you know what? No, I'm not interested in that. I'm just interested in being myself, being my authentic self, and that alone will set the tone for them to learn, grow, change for the better, whatever the case may be. Um, yeah, I like it that way. I like it that way. But yeah, besides that, I may release. No, I was gonna say I may release another video. I'll load it the same weekend, but I probably will leave that for next weekend because again, as I said, my schedule has changed nowadays, so things are changing up quite a bit. But yes, I will leave it at that. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed, feel free to leave a comment, a like, subscribe. Um, if you have any suggestions for me, let me know, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.